Good morning, friends. Tony Pellegrini here, and grateful for you tuning in this morning, this afternoon, wherever you might be, to visit with us and visit with us about the teaching and learning here at SUU and the wonderful things that are going on. We have a guest today, Dr. Lynn White, who is participating with us and will visit with us and take some time to explain some of the wonderful things that she does to keep her students engaged and moving forward within her classes. Lynn, would you be willing to take a moment or two and tell us a little about yourself, a little about your activity here at SUU?
Yeah, sure, Tony. Well, I've been here since 1997. So this is, I'm starting my 23rd year of teaching here. Yes, it's an accomplishment, I suppose.
It absolutely is.
But I come from Quebec, Canada. And I guess an interesting, thing about me is that I was raised 5 months of the year in the bush in northern Quebec.
Oh, my.
And so it was quite the struggle up and out to get here, and I'm very grateful to be at SUU. It's a wonderful place.
Well, I think it may be a little bushy from time to time here, but not too terrible, I hope.
Yeah.
Please, go ahead.
So I think you asked about, what I do here?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I teach in the psychology department. And over the years, I've taught a wider range of classes. And I think that's because initially, we were a very small department. There were only 5 or 6 of us. And so you had to kind of be a Jack or Jill of all trades. Hopefully not a master of none, but you did have to take on a wide array. So I teach physiological psychology. We call it brain and behavior to make it a little less intimidating for students. Recently, I was able to create 2 labs to go along with that. So we've got a animal behavioral neuroscience lab now at SUU, and well, we've had it for a long time, but it's got a new name. But recently, we started a human neuropsychophysiology lab.
But that doesn't scare kids away?
I think they're drawn to it because it sounds so impressive. They want to put that on a resume.
All right.
Yeah. So I teach that, and I teach health psychology, stress and pain, statistics, research design, and independent research. And the last 3 courses all have labs attached.
Wonderful.
So, yeah. Keeps me out of trouble.
I think it absolutely would. I think it absolutely. There's so much to do.
Yeah.
Wanted to ask you a few questions or address a few questions, and maybe you could go in just a little more detail. You've identified some of the classes that you teach. Could you go into a little more detail, maybe about those classes that you teach for our listeners and potential students, maybe that would like to be involved with those?
Okay. Well, the ones I think that the students might like the most, because these are optional classes for most people, and they appeal to a wide range of majors, would be the health psych and stress and pain classes. So health psychology, best way to explain that, I think, is to say that it's a marriage between psychology and medicine. And health psychology tries to find ways to work within the medical field to improve people's health and well-being, keep them healthy longer, and if they do get sick, find ways of promoting recovery, a quicker recovery and more extensive recovery. So it's using psychological principles and theories towards those goals. And we even work with policymakers to look at ways to improve, whether it's, health insurance policies or, hospital administration policies. There's lots of things that health psychologists do beyond research, and working directly with potential clients.
Well, I could see how that would be very invitational and engaging to your learners who want professions within those areas.
Absolutely.
A lot with health benefit or health issues or health professions. We're only going to need less in the future, aren't we?
Yes. In fact, this area is projected to grow tremendously over the next decade or so as health concerns become more and more salient for those of us who are, well, we're getting more and more age experienced.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah.
Well, one, I love it here in Cedars. You can tell, and I know you love it here as well
Thank
too. But as I go to Salt Lake or down into Las Vegas, I'll come over the top of the hill and see that brown haze that's over.
Yeah.
And so we live in such a wonderful place. We can look out the window here, and it may be a little hazy, way away, but we really do have some strong benefits of living here, and the health related issues that we have. So I think that's part of the reason why these people are coming,
Maybe, yeah.
and maybe a little bit of that.
Well, and the great reputation that SUU has.
We do. We're very happy with that. I ask I work with teachers, K-12 teachers all the time, and when I am in class with them, I'll ask them, what is your teaching philosophy? Can I pull your arm, or can I invite you to talk to us about your philosophy? What's your philosophy of teaching?
Well, it's evolved over the years.
Good.
Constantly changing, but I think there's kind of three parts to it, maybe, that I'd like to talk about. And one, it's going to sound oversimplified, but I'll expand a little. And that is to say, where there's a will, there's a way. And I think, what I'm referring to here, of course, is motivation, right? Motivation to teach and motivation to learn, because in a classroom environment or an extracurricular environment, it goes both ways. So teachers who come in undermotivated or uninspired, how can you expect a student to show any enthusiasm for the course if you yourself don't do that? And so when I come in, short of bouncing off the walls, I try to, get them to see how wonderful this course is going to be and why it's important to them. In fact, in health psychology, I come in and tell them, I'm going to teach you things that might very well save your life and the lives of people you love. And so I try and get their attention right away. And then, but like I said, it's a two-way street. So it would be hard, I think, for a teacher to maintain that level of optimism and enthusiasm if students, sat there and... It
really is kind of a symbiotic relationship, isn't it?
It is. And so I try and build rapport right on, right at day one. And like I said, I try to see how the course is going to be important for them and build up their intrinsic motivation to take the class. And that seems to work fairly well. Some are more of a challenge, but I love challenges.
And I'll bet you found one or two that have even pushed you with their enthusiasm.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
It goes on both sides of the scale. You've got some students that really
absolutely
encourage you in your motivation.
Mm-hmm. I've had students, and I tell people that the students have made me, if to the extent that I'm a better teacher today, it's because of the students who have given me feedback. Whether it's, the brightness of their eyes as they hear something that intrigues them, or the tears and statistics when I say something that maybe, might go a little bit over their head. But it's invigorated me. It's inspired me to, try to find more engaging ways to connect with students and to get them excited. And absolutely, it's it's a two-way street.
It is fun. It is fun. That is really good.
So that's one part of my teaching philosophy, is to recognize the importance of motivation on both sides of the equation. The other has to do with setting the bar, and I think this is something that we all kind of find a little challenging. You want high academic standards, but you don't want it to exclude students. And it's a funny thing, because over the years I found that it seems like no matter where I set the bar, a lot of times I see students just doing what they can to just make it right over that.
Guilty as charged too. It's kind of human nature a little bit, maybe.
Well, it's interesting, because I have a theory about that.
Okay.
And it might be that I heard it somewhere else. So
that is okay. That is okay.
But we have seen, with the advent of the internet and video games and everything else, we're bombarded with stimuli every day. And it's quick changing stimuli. It's hard to keep anybody's attention on one thing for very long. And so I kind of wonder if, um, students are accustomed to, wanting to do more and wanting to do everything, particularly enjoyable things. So if we set the bar in a way that they perceive that it's out of their reach, then they may not try. And I think it's because of FOMO, fear of missing out, right? To reach that bar, it's going to take a lot of time and energy and other resources. And to the extent that they have to invest that, they're not doing other things that they want to do. So the challenge for me is to have a very high bar, because I think that they can do it, but put it so high that they don't see how high it is. But I give them all the resources, so they achieve it without thinking about the resources that they're investing themselves.
I think that's powerful, to almost put a ladder up next to it, so that you've created to step by step go up that ladder and be able to make those accomplishments.
And I think if you engage them in such a way that they're not thinking about the other things that they could be doing, we don't want FOMO to kick in the classroom, right? So it's challenging, but doable.
Well, and I love the attitude of challenging but doable. You see these students, I'm going to call them children, they're my grandchildren's age, but as they come in, you have a wide continuum of learners that come in. How do you try to address that wide variety of learning styles that they come to you with? How do you build them up or help them develop the successes where they're strong?
Yeah. Well, one way is I think that you need to have or use techniques that engage the senses. And, some people are auditory learners, and others, they like to see things, so I have them read information. And others are more tactile, and they like to act things out. And so I have tried to put a wide array of activities in the classroom. Some are visual, some are auditory, and we do act some things out. I don't know if anybody's who's listening is familiar with the action potential, but neural transmission, and we do the wave in class to act that out. And so I'm always looking for ways that we can appeal to students' senses, and I think that's one way. And the other is to have, of course, a wide variety of assessments, different types of assessments. So that way they can, if they can't succeed in one, well, I shouldn't say can't, but if they have trouble to succeed in one, then they have the opportunity to succeed in the other. And I think that, building up self-confidence and self-esteem and self-efficacy are all good ways of, encouraging them and showing them that it is something that they can do regardless of their learning style.
Well, what a wonderful opportunity as well for them to take those knowledge, skills, and dispositions from your class to other classes, to say, I'm particularly a tactile learner, and it really helps. Or what can I do in here to reach out to a professor and say, what could I do in here to use that particular sense? Or as they go into their own professions or into their own personal relationships, these are things that I do well, and I'm going to be able to succeed and provide support to your organization as far as employment.
And the other thing is, I'm not against students coming in. In fact, I invite them to do this. If they struggle, say, well, how do you think, what ways do you think you learn? And how can we adapt what we're doing in class to align with those styles? So I get a lot of feedback from students. Oh, you know what? It would really help me if you did X, Y, Z. And then I try and figure out, okay, so how can I do X, Y, Z?
How can I get that done?
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Have you always been a great teacher?
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I struggle to see this as, a great teacher. I'm an enthusiastic teacher.
Okay.
And I think, and I hope that I have a lasting impact on students. And I guess, I saw a student that I hadn't seen since 2003. And I must confess, I didn't recognize her. 2003 was
A while ago.
she looked at me and she goes, "Are you Lynn White?" And I'm like, maybe. And she was telling me how she took my stress and pain class back in 2003, and how she used it recently, in her own life. She was going through a challenging part of her life. And so, that's nice to get that kind of feedback and everything. But it's I think you have to also recognize that you're not going to be able to reach everybody. And I struggle with that, because it's I really want to, but there are just some people that, for whatever reason,
we're different personalities, whatever it might be. And I really see that as a hurdle, maybe, that we that can be a challenge to us as teachers. I think all of our listeners, we'd love to touch everyone's minds, everyone's hearts. Can you talk for a moment maybe about how you address that hurdle, or maybe other hurdles that you've had? And maybe let me go back just a second and
Sure.
rephrase the question.
Sure.
Have you always been an enthusiastic teacher? What are some of the things that you've had to overcome to get to, and what challenges or opportunities did you have to really work towards to become as enthusiastic as you are, Lynn?
Well, I think initially I didn't have a large toolbox of techniques, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew the techniques that I had been exposed to as a student,
and probably you were comfortable with as well.
Right. And so the techniques, though, that I was exposed to, I mean, back then, as you know, faculty stood in front of a podium with lecture notes and just read from their lecture notes. And so I started off kind of doing the same thing, and I would try and get excited about what I was reading, and I realized that was no longer going to cut it. And so it was a lot of communicating with students. It was a lot of communicating with other faculty, going to conferences to learn about techniques. With the advent of Google, that's been a great
and the
resource.
internet. Oh my goodness, the kids are different today than they were back in 2002, aren't they?
They are. And in many ways, I think the changes I've seen are very positive, and others, I worry about, but I try and figure out, okay, well, how can we take advantage of these changes and change ourselves in such a way to align better with them and address them, from a more personal standpoint, or whatever it takes to get them to improve and to grow and to learn and everything else. So I think the obstacle at first was just not knowing what I could do. And time is always going to be an issue, right?
It is. We've only got 14 more weeks this semester. And, oh my goodness.
Wait a second, I'm a week behind.
No, you're there. But I think that you're listening to students. They can be great teachers for us. They can provide some great, and listening to other peers, like you had mentioned, can be great supports to us to say, let me give some of these things a try.
Yeah.
If you're brave enough to share that with me, boy, I should be brave enough to experiment a little bit,
right,
and try a little bit, some of these techniques, approaches that may help or assist you.
Well, I not to say that these techniques will work for everybody in every class, but I have a website, and I have posted what I do with the students in each class. And it's intended primarily for the students, so they know what to do and what the different assignments are and the different activities and everything. But if anybody wanted to go there and check it out,
I would love to get that from you. When you get back, would you send it an email with the address? And I promise when I put the link up to this podcast, I'll put that up as well, so they can click on that.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
I know I have heard from a few faculty that they've been visiting the site and
Wonderful.
using some of the things that I do in class. And I know some of the students who've gone on to get PhDs themselves are now using some of that material.
How exciting.
So, but it's sharing like this. I think that's key. So students sharing with you, peers, back and forth sharing. If we stay in our isolated little pods, that's going to limit improvement. And so I'm all ears.
I'm just so tickled with that your students are coming back and using some of those. It reminds me, Archimedes said, if I had a lever long enough, I could change the world. When you first started teaching here in the late 90s, you had a lever long enough to change those kids in your class. But over time, as they've moved on and progressed, you've moved out on that ladder. And really your efforts, or that lever, excuse me, and really you are touching lives of people. So far, you're changing the world because of some of the efforts that you're making. So keep doing what you're doing.
Well, I think educators as a whole are helping to change the world.
I hope so. I do. Our time's just about up, but I do have to. I'm sorry. I do have to ask one last question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you, Lynn?
Well, I don't know.
Well, how about on Lynn's scale? How's that?
Well, you see, I think maybe that's what makes me weird is I think I'm normal, but everybody else thinks I'm weird.
I think.
But I maybe it's from growing up in the bush, but I've got cockroaches in my office. They're contained.
Oh, thank you.
I've got a snake in my office.
Oh my goodness.
Up until recently, I had a tarantula in my office. I have them. I tell people, well, they're for educational purposes. In reality, I just love to scare people and be scared.
Okay.
So I've got that part of my personality, that kind of darker side, if you will, but a fun, darker side.
I like fun, dark. That's just great.
And then I've got this other side. I like to wear sparkles around my eyes and, drink, not drink, well, maybe.
Okay.
Dress in pink tie-dye. I mean, I just like doing weird stuff.
Well, you connect with some out there. You connect with some, and so it's wonderful to be able to push you just a little bit gently on that. That's wonderful. Keep doing what you're doing, friends. This is going to wrap up our meeting today with Lynn White here at SUU. We're just tickled about your participation and Lynn's connection as well. And Lynn, thank you so much for engaging with us and for all that you do. And we just please, I will put her website out here for your review learners, and we will continue our great association that we have. Lynn, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.